show, but we begin. Let's take a look. We've got Bill Burton right now and Nancy Pfotenhauer. We've got both of you joining. Let me what do you make of this decision? We have the hockey mom here, self-styled hockey mom, who's the regular woman next door, the one who's looking out for her kids, getting them educated, helping them with sports, a very regular person. And then the RNC says, no, that's not good enough. What we want is a style plate here. We want a style, we want to put on some show here. We're going to spend a ton of money to dress her up in fashion at Neiman Marcus and Saks, and we're going to do this because of what? What is about here? What are they up to here, the Republican National Committee? What's the goal here?
I tell you what, I've had a hard time discerning why they do a lot of what they do. A lot of the behavior over there is erratic, and it starts at the top of the ticket. But frankly, you know, I think we got bigger problems to worry about than the decisions that they make like this with their money. It's not something that we do, but the American people can decide on that. We're focused on things like the economy, on the you know, Senator Obama had a meeting with some of his top foreign policy advisors today to talk about, you know, where we are in the world right now.
Right.
You know, those are the things that we're focused on. But, you know, okay. I can't wait to hear Nancy's answer on this.
Well, I'm focused on this right now, so let's go to Nancy Pfotenhauer for an explanation. First of all, thank you for coming on, Nancy. I wanted to ask you, who made this decision to spend all this money of contributors' money? People kick into the Republican Party. Who made the decision? Can you tell me?
I actually don't know who at the RNC made the decision, but it was obviously the RNC's call and the RNC's
I understand it, no. Let me tell you what they say when you call over there.
Okay.
And this is where the hot potato is being flipped around. You may say this is small potatoes, but that little potato is being thrown around an awful lot right now because it's very hot. They say, go check with the McCain campaign. They made the call. Who, if it's such an important thing to know, why don't they admit something small like an expenditure of $150,000? The treasurer of the RNC is responsible. She's got a fiduciary responsibility here. Nobody will accept responsibility for this decision to turn the hockey mom into Liza Doolittle. Who made this decision?
Chris, if I knew, I would tell you honestly, but I just don't know. And I will make, I guess, election history and this election cycle by saying I agree with Bill Burton on something, and that is that, I mean, basically, we should be talking about much bigger issues. I mean,
well,
clearly
let me tell
this
you,
is a
how big,
distraction.
let's talk, okay, I'm with you on that. I'm with you on that. We've talked about the superficial. Now let's talk about the reality here. And I want to talk about this, the role of the vice president. I want to give you a shot at it, Nancy. You're a pro. You're not somebody in from out of town. You know how politics works. What is the role of the vice president under the U.S. Constitution? Simply put, you know it or you don't. Either a person understands the role of the vice president or they don't. What, as you understand it from the Constitution, as a professional, is the role of a vice president? It's very important you know this answer. We're filling the part. In 2 weeks.
That's right. That's right. Well, I mean, obviously, the role of the vice president is to support the president, but also to preside when necessary over the U.S. Senate. And I think that this is also a tempest in a teapot.
No, that's not the role of the vice president. No, you got it wrong. I gave you a shot, Nancy. I want you to try again. What is the constitutional role of the vice president in the Constitution? What's written in the Constitution? You're all
Chris,
strict.
I'm not a constitutional scholar, but I do know that I'm not a constitutional scholar, but I've been reading the commentary on this, and it seems to me that people are parsing words, and she was obviously trying to explain to a young child what the vice president would do.
Nancy, I appreciate you coming on the show. There's a tough defense of this person, Sarah Palin. Apparently, she doesn't understand the role of the vice president. Let me state it very clearly right now, is to replace the president if that is necessary. As Colin Powell said on Sunday, that's the job of the vice president, to stand ready under the Constitution in the tragic circumstances to replace the president. Now, that's one role. The other role is to have only a tie-breaking role as presiding officer of the U.S. Senate.
Exactly.
That's it. The Constitution specifically prescribes that. In fact, it says that's all that the person has the right to do. Now, here's Sarah Palin with her definition of this role, which sounds strange to me, and I've been in this city a long time. I have never heard anybody say, and by the way, it's very similar to what she said in her debate with Joe Biden, which made me wonder then, where did she get her civics? Let's take a look. Here's Sarah Palin.
A vice president has a really great job because not only are they there to support the president's agenda, they're like the team member, the teammate to that president, but also they're in charge of the United States Senate. So if they want to, they can really get in there with the senators and make a lot of good policy changes that will make life better.
Continue that thought, Nancy.
Well, I think that she's clearly just trying to break down what it means to preside over the U.S. Senate upon occasion to a young child. And, you know, having raised 5, I can tell you that you obviously have to simplify things when you discuss it. I think that you guys are
She's talking to a news reporter at the time. Nancy, she's talking to a news reporter. She said that she had been asked the question early in the day by a second grader. In this case, she's talking to a news reporter. Explain, either she's right about the role of the vice presidency or I'm wrong. I say the role of the vice presidency under the Constitution is limited to breaking ties in the U.S. Senate. It has nothing to do with policy making, nothing to do with Senate leadership on either side of the aisle. There is no policy role there, whatever, for the vice president. If you'd even watched John Adams on television a few months ago, you would know that. Going at the very beginning of our democracy, the vice president has a formal role only. She believes somehow that the Vice President of the United States has some sort of commanding policy development role and can lead the U.S. Senate. Where did she get this from?
You can't just apply this criticism to Governor Palin and then not apply it to Joe Biden, who is constantly inferring, and Barack Obama is as well, that he's going to offer, function as some chief foreign policy advisor, for goodness sake. And then off the record claiming that he's, that Barack Obama is basically going to make our enemies nervous enough that they're going to contrive or generate an international crisis.
It's so obvious to everybody watching you're changing the subject. I'm talking about what I'm going to ask you a simple question because you know the answer. What is the legislative authority of a vice president? The legislative authority.
From the standpoint of they cast tie-breaking votes, I don't even know how you're parsing legislative authority. Obviously, legislation is drafted in the House and the Senate. Certain legislation, like revenues or tax bills, have to be conceived in the House and then passed in the Senate.
But the fact is, does Governor Palin know this? She thinks she's setting up policy shop in the vice president's office in the United States Senate.
You know that the vice president has a permanent office in the U.S. Senate. The vice president engages casually, maybe not formally, but casually all the time with the Senate Republican Policy Committee or
No. Let's watch her again.
Yes,
Let's watch it again. Let's watch her again because I think you're missing what she's saying. She's saying the vice president will be a leader in the U.S. Senate in developing policy. Let's watch it again. It's very important that we get this right because the clothing allowance was right. The prep sessions weren't exactly right. Let's take a look. By the way, I like the red leather jacket, but I'm telling you, what's underneath it is a problem here. Let's take a look. Let's take a look.
A vice president has a really great job because not only are they there to support the president's agenda, they're like the team member, the teammate to that president, but also they're in charge of the United States Senate. So if they want to, they can really get in there with the senators and make a lot of good policy changes that will make life better.
Bill Burton, is that your understanding of the role of the vice president? They're in charge of the United States Senate. They can get in there and make would you please say something instead of standing back and letting them destroy themselves?
Well,
I've
appreciated this civics lesson, like all your viewers.
What do you think about this?
The role of the vice president is to break ties in the Senate if there's a tie, and to, if there is something that happens, take over the job of the presidency. I mean, that's how it's prescribed in the Constitution, as far as I understand it, and I think that that's what you're expected of as vice president. Now, Joe Biden obviously brings a lot to the ticket. He's a guy who has a lot of experience as it relates to foreign policy, as it relates to helping folks in the middle class, cops, firefighters, help to pass the Violence Against Women Act. But I don't know that I don't know that he thinks that the role of the vice president's the same as
So Bill,
does.
You think that Joe Biden's not going to consult with other Senate Democrats or discuss policy with his colleagues? I mean, I think it's a totally false construct, Chris.
Describe it a little differently than Sarah Palin did.
It's a totally false construct that you're holding out. Of course, the vice president, who has an office in the U.S. Capitol and who is prescribed a specific role to cast tie-breaking votes, and they've cast a few important ones in history,
is going to interact with, get in there and really mix it up on policy.
Oh, come on! So Joe Biden, who has never been able to really control his level of engagement, and that's why you sequestered him in Delaware.
Let me tell you something, Nancy.
You think he's not going to discuss with his fellow Senate Democrats public policy?
Nancy, let me tell you the bad news here, and I know you're making the best case you can, but I'm going to tell you something, Nancy Fodenhauer. In 1961, when Lyndon Johnson moved from being Senate Majority Leader to Vice President, he thought he could continue his leadership role in the Senate. He went to one meeting of the Democratic caucus, and he never went again because he was completely frozen out. They do not let anybody but his senator get involved with policy decisions. Nobody but U.S. senators can act on the floor of the United States Senate. That's the way the Constitution works. And to get that wrong is to get something very big wrong, and I don't know why Randy Schoenemann or one of the smart people around, or I don't know who else, Nicole Wiles, somebody ought to go to the candidate for vice president and give them a copy of the Constitution to read. That's all it takes. It doesn't take a lot of penetrating thought. Read
Chris,
the job description.
Are you actually postulating that the Vice President of the United States of a certain political party does not engage with the other senators of that same political party and have public policy discussions? How can you possibly postulate that?
Let me just tell you that. And you're doing the best you can, Nancy. You wouldn't have said what the candidate just said on this tape, which I've played twice, that the Vice President is in charge of the U.S. Senate. The Vice President of the United States is not in charge of the U.S. Senate. The Vice President of the United States is not in charge of policy development. They're not in charge. They're the formal presiding officer with absolutely no authority. As written in the Constitution, it says will have no authority except to break a tie. And somehow, in all this trip to Washington through Neiman's and through Saks and everywhere else that she stopped off, she never picked up a copy of the Constitution. And it is a problem. It is a problem, Nancy, and you know it is. We'll talk about this after the election. You know it is. You got a candidate who doesn't know the job description. Bill Burton, thank you. Nancy Pfotenhauer.
If this were a dictatorship, it'd be a heck of a lot easier. Just so long as I'm the dictator.